So what we're going to have a look at today is, I know a lot of people have very little confidence when it comes to their spelling abilities. Unless you are writing these especially difficult words on a day-to-day basis, it's very difficult to remember how to spell certain words. So the aim of today's session is to show you some of the techniques that are available and hopefully see if any of them stick. Even if one of them works for you, then it's worth it. So if I just present this to you, please tell me in the chat if you are unable to see the screen being shared. But that's it. So the thing that we're going to start with today is mnemonics, which I always find quite funny because mnemonics are a device that helps you remember how to spell a word. However, the word mnemonic is awful and it's really difficult to spell. It's the same as if you have dyslexia. The word dyslexia is really difficult to spell. I think it seems to be a joke that people who come up with these terms must be playing on us. So we're going to be looking at mnemonics. We do not pronounce the first letter M. It is silent. So we're going to use mnemonics to help with spelling. So first and foremost, what is a mnemonic? Well, it's a memory trick that helps you remember the word or the letter order. So there we go. It's a memory helper. It's something that's there to sort of give you a certain sort of like a reminder. It helps your brain remember the letters all in the correct order. Now, you may be aware of certain ones of these that exist already. For example, the word because. A mnemonic to help remember this. It's actually a type of acronym. So this one, they use the letters at the beginning of all these words to come up with a phrase. And in this case, they've said because. Big elephants can always understand small elephants. So when I'm going to write that word, I literally go, because big elephants can always understand. And I literally write big elephants can. And for every one of those words, I just pick the first letter. And that's how it works to help me remember how to spell something. There are lots and lots of examples of these out there. There are lots and lots of examples of commonly used mnemonics, which some people use them and they find they really help. Me personally, I do use these. They do work for me, only with certain words. And with other words, I use other techniques because it's all about what works for you, what works for that word. So, as I said, we've got things like because. Now, why do we use them? It's because some words aren't phonetic. It means some words, we would assume that they are spelled in a different way to how they are. So in the English language, every one of our letters has a sound. So we assume that when we put those letters together, it makes a sound. Some words don't follow those rules because these words do not originate in English. So for example, if we look at words that we have taken from French, hotel, restaurant, if we were spelling the word restaurant in phonetic English, making it sound like the noises that each of those letters make, in the middle of the word restaurant, we have an AU, which makes an O sound, restaurant. But it's not a combination of letters that we use in English that often. If we were doing it simply, if you look at the chat, we would spell it something like rest-o-rant, like this instead, where we would, because that to us, to our English brains who know how these sounds work, that would be the most obvious sort of answer. So we would replace that middle sound with a letter O. So some words don't sound the same way that they're spelled, and they're not spelled the same way that they sound. So that's how mnemonics work. They can make spelling easier. One of the best tips that I can give is this next one that's written here that says silly or visual clues work really well. If something is silly and makes you laugh, there is a chance you will remember it. So, like the word because has no relevance to elephants, but by saying that, I can picture elephants and I remember how to spell it. If we look at some other examples, a lot of people spell the word friend wrong. They get the E and the I in the wrong order. It's I before E, it's free end. So we all say friends ride in every neighbourhood driveway. I just remember that when I'm thinking about my friendships, I am the most important person. So when I'm writing the word friend, the letter I comes before E. That's what comes first. Now, if we have a think about some of the other commonly misspelled words that have mnemonics attached to them, separate. The way that we pronounce that word is separate. The actual vowel sounds, the A, E, I, O, U, are very muted. You can't tell apart from the E at the beginning, separate. They're not very clear sounds. So many people spell it wrong. Now, I always remember there's a rat in the word separate, and it helps me to remember that it is spelled S-E-P-A-R-A-T. It has R-A-T. It has a rat in the word. And that, I literally picture that almost any time. Or I pronounce it when I'm typing separate to ensure that I'm doing it properly. Now, if we have a look at the next one, if we're talking about a principle, not a principle as in a skill or a quality or something that means something important to us, a principal as in the leader of a school, a head teacher. I mean, it's more commonly used in America, the phrase, we would say head teacher. But a principal is your pal, he's your friend. So you've got to remember that that is spelled with a P-A-L at the end. If we were talking about our principles, so again, what makes us us, what are our skills and sort of qualities as a person, that is spelled differently. So it sounds the same, but it is spelled with an L-E on the end. So I remember the principal is your pal. And that reminds me that that person, when I'm saying the word, when I'm writing the word principal, and I'm doing it about a person, it's P-A-L at the end. Now, I have, on the bottom of this PowerPoint, put together a couple of different activities, because after every lesson, I always send out the PowerPoints or screenshots. If the PowerPoints are too big, I'll just do screenshots on an email instead. But I've included some exercises on here with a couple of words so that you can try and have a go at some of these yourself to create your own mnemonic, to create either something that will help you visualize something that helps you spell the word, like visualizing a rat when you're spelling separate, or you can think about mnemonics, so the ways that you can use the letters through the word. You can associate each one of those with a word or a song, things like that. So there are some examples on these following slides. So you can have a go at these should you wish to. As I say, once I send out the work, I'm not going to be chasing you up for homework or anything like that. It's up to you whether or not you complete any of these activities. I just want to let you know that there are some on there, that's all. So you can create them for words like these. So we've got believe, necessary, calendar. Again, see, necessary. I remember this one. It is necessary for a shirt to have one collar, one letter C, and two sleeves. So it has one C and S, and that's how I remember how to spell the word necessary. And again, it's something that I use on a very, very regular basis. If you can find any of these techniques to help you, happy days. So some of the other ones I put on here for practice. So think about words that you personally get wrong on a regular basis. I have words that I type incorrectly all the time, and I know how to spell them, but my fingers don't seem to want to write them on a keyboard in the right order. So Have a think about what words impact you, things that you may have to use for work, things that you may need to use on a regular basis, because these are the words that you really need to be practicing. It's one thing if you can learn how to spell all the words that I'm putting up on these slides, but if you don't use them, it's got no relevance to you. So think about, what words do I spell wrong all the time? And what can I do to help me remember it? Can I put something visual, like a picture? Can I make it so that I've got words or a chant to help me remember it? There's going to be something that helps. As I say, I always recommend do something silly. I always remember the silly ones. Can you do something visual, like the rat and separate? Just something easy to remember as well. There's no point forcing yourself to try to use these techniques if they don't work for you. Like I say, everybody's different. Everybody has different words, and different words have different ways to remember them. So that's a sort of brief introduction to mnemonics. As I say, I will send this PowerPoint out as soon as we have finished today. I did split the things that I wanted to talk about over 2 different slideshows, because this next one is bigger. Now it is, if you've ever heard me in previous classes talk about my absolute love for the English language, I love the English language. And one of my favourite books, for those of you that have been to the lessons where we've talked about idioms and euphemisms before, one of my favourite books on euphemisms, I can't find in my house. I cannot find it. And I found a copy in a charity shop the other day of the exact same book. And it's so good, I bought it again. So, as well as everything else to do with euphemisms, to do with idioms, don't worry if you're not sure what they are. We will have another session on those one day in the future. What we're going to have a look at now is homophones. So I thought the easiest way of sort of breaking this down was to explain what a homophone is. And I believe, is it Latin or is it Greek? The origin of this one, I'm not entirely sure. The word homophone, if you break it down, it means, homo means the same. And phone, the word phone in either Latin or Greek, forgive me, means sound. So homophones are words that sound the same as each other, but have different meanings. And there are a lot of them. I looked up the most common examples in the English language. And if I tell you that I had to narrow them down to just 2 slides, there are lots of them. And as language evolves and develops and new words and things are coming out all the time, there are going to be more and more of them. But these are basically words that when we say them out loud, they have a meaning. When we write them down, depending on how we spell it, depends on that meaning. And again, what you'll see on some of these later slides are some ways to help you remember which version of each word is the correct usage. So, homophones, words that sound the same, but have different meanings and different spellings. So if you have a look at this first list, the most everyday ones are on the top. So that first example says there, there, there. So we can see with our eyes, they are spelled very differently. But when we say them out loud, there, 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 they sound almost identical. We look at the second one down, 2, 2, 2. We look at the third one, we've got your and your. It's the same with every single one of these examples. We've got different meanings depending on how they are spelled. So sometimes we look at them and we can identify quite easily which word is appropriate for what use in what context. However, as with all these things, if we don't use them on a frequent basis, then it can be really difficult to remember when to use each one. I always, for example, that top one, there, there, and there, I draw a little diagram that helps me remember which one of those I use for each different time. Things like your and your. If I'm talking about something that belongs to you, it is your your lesson, your phone, your dinner time, your dog, your whatever. It's Y-O-U-R. If, however, I'm talking about you being something, you are, I find that one easier to differentiate just because if I see the word your with the apostrophe R-E at the end of it, I pronounce that when I'm reading it out loud, I pronounce it as the full two separate words, you are. And that helps me because then I know that if it sounds wrong when I read it out, it's the wrong version of the word. So, ways to help us remember about how to use the right homophones. We need to think about the meaning of the word. So that means basically, if in this example here, it's the word there. So they left their bags at school. So we know that if we look at this first one on here, where we've got those three different spellings, they left their bags at school. Let's do it as a process of elimination. We're not going to instantly find the right answer. We're going to get rid of the wrong answers. So from that example, we've got the first one that says T-H-E-I-R. Now that one means there as in something belongs to someone. Okay, so that could be right. The second one, there, over there. The third one, oh look, it says apostrophe R-E. I'm going to pronounce that as they are. Okay, so if I read that sentence back and it says, they left their bags at school. No, it's not that one. So I can eliminate that third option. If I look at the second one, they left their, like over there, bags at school. No, that doesn't make sense. Therefore, it should be the first one. There, they left their, meaning something belongs to them, bags at school. So even if we don't know the right answer immediately, we may be in a position where we can identify the wrong ones, and that in itself means finding the correct answer at the end of it. So that particular example, we had 3 to choose from. We got it wrong. The other thing that we can do is use spelling clues. So again, it's using like those mnemonics, it's using memory techniques to help you, to guide you. For example, here, that first spelling, T-H-E-I-R, you said it's about ownership. Something belongs to something. If something belongs to someone, it is theirs, right? Now it has the word heir in it. An heir is somebody who receives something, who inherits something, and therefore they are the owner of something. So by sort of having a look, it's got the word heir inside the word their. So they're little clues like that, that again, if it helps you, it works. If that particular example, you don't get it, do you know what? Fine, don't use that one. There are all these other different techniques that you can use to help you. You can also do things like, if we look at the second example, so we've got there, meaning over there. I mean, I literally point every time I see that spelling of the word, and that helps me. It's something a bit silly, but it's a physical clue that helps me. It's there. So there has the word here in it. So it must be talking about a place, like over there. And then the last example on there, their, is short for they are. It's a contraction. It's a shortened version of it. So by pronouncing it as they are, then we can tell when we're reading it in the correct and the incorrect way. So, spelling techniques. Chunking. It's a wonderful term. It always makes me think of chocolate bars, if I'm entirely honest. Chunking something means to break it down, to chop it up. If you've got a great big word and some of the constituent sounds, so the sounds that make it up, you're not sure of, you can literally break down the word, but cover half of it up, read a little bit of it, and think about, okay, so what comes next, or what sounds do I next want it to say? You can say it as you write it. So the word, this is what I said I did, they, if you pronounce it as they are, then you know the correct spelling. You know you're using that right version of it. And then the last one, the last example on here, so mnemonics, stationary. So we have the word stationary and we have the word stationary. One means if we are standing still, we are not moving. One means if I have paper and pens and scissors, this is called, as a group noun, stationary. If you remember that stationary has paper, so it's basically, it has, I always think of it as paper, it's got it's got that sound in it. So I look at the, so I say stationary has paper, and it means that if I'm writing a stationary order, I go stationary, paper, so it's ER, because paper has ER as well. And paper is a type of stationery. Again, if these work for you, brilliant. If they don't worry about it. You will find other ways. Mental images, I love it. Really works for me. So you can see with these ones, we've got the sea, and then we've got sea. One means something we do with our eyes, and one is literally the waves of the ocean. So to remember which one of these that you're talking about, try to associate things like pictures. So the word see, S-E-E, I imagine that the E and the E are eyes looking at you. And that, again, that works for me. You can also do things like the swap test. So if you replace the word with its meaning, does it still make sense in that sentence? If you replace it with something else that means the same, so the example here, again, they are, if you replace that with they are, and you read it, and it makes grammatical sense, you're fine. So, some examples. Oh, the answers come up. That's blooming typical. So, again, don't worry, I'm not going to be asking you to answer these questions out loud during a group class. Again, what I will do is I will send out the PowerPoints with all of this information on it so that you can have a go at any of these little, these sort of questions if you want to test yourself at the end. Now, I think the key on this one is just making ourselves familiar with them. Because when I looked up most commonly misspelled words and most common homophones, they were pretty much the same thing. The words that people spell incorrectly the most are spelled correctly, but they have the wrong meaning. And that's when spelling is important in the exams. You are allowed to make spelling mistakes in the writing exam. In the reading exam, you could spell every word wrong as long as our markers at the exam board are able to read and understand your answers. The reading exam, there are no marks for spelling. It's all about finding information in text. In the writing exam, because you're asked to write 2 pieces, you can get a maximum of 3 marks for each piece that you write. And to get 3 marks, you are allowed to make. It says occasional mistakes are fine as long as it doesn't change the meaning of what you're trying to say. For example, if I said, I have a pair of pens and I spelled it P-E-A-R, it would change the meaning. What I'm trying to say is I have a pair, I have 2. But if I spell it P-E-A-R, that's the name of a fruit. And therefore, it changes the meaning of what I'm trying to say. And it doesn't make sense if I said I have a pair of pens. If I'm talking about having 2, I need to make sure. In fact, is pair on that list? No, is it on the second list? It is towards the end. In fact, there's 3. So we have pair meaning 2, like a pair of trousers is 2 legs. We have pair as in a fruit. And we have pair, which usually means to pare something back. It's almost like to reduce something back to its bare bones. Bare is another one. We have bare the animal, grr, and then we have bare meaning empty or naked. So we need to just make ourselves familiar with which of these words do we use frequently, which ones aren't we sure about, and which of these techniques could we possibly use to help us. Now, it's very difficult to see how well you pick this up, because unless I throw out a spelling test and send it to you all, it's very difficult to check. So it's one of those things where keep an eye on it. If I ask you to do a piece of writing, if I send you a mock exam or something like that and you have a go at it, when you've written your piece, stop, go back and check. Make sure that you are spelling the words correctly and you're using the correct versions of the words as well. It's the only part where you could potentially lose marks, is if you use the wrong version of a word. And it happens fairly frequently. Let me just see if I can show you the actual mark scheme. I know we look at these fairly frequently in class, but it's because how else are we going to know about what's important in the eyes of the exam board unless we look at literally their book? So if we look at spelling on their answer booklet, oh, that's a question paper, not a mark scheme. So there you go. Grammar, spelling. Let's make this a little bit more legible. So to score 3 marks on each of the pieces, what you must be able to demonstrate is correct spelling of straightforward words. So everyday words, common words, and some ambitious words. This is at level 2. It's the list of words they expect you to know at level 1 is slightly lower level. I mean, it's a level 1 list of words. So correct spelling of straightforward words and some ambitious or specialist words. So we're talking about anything that is, if you're writing about anything that involves sort of specialized language. So for example, let's say you are being asked to write a letter to your medical centre, your medical practice, and you need to include the name of something medical. Can you spell that right? Because it's a very specific term. If I was writing to say something about my computer had gone wrong, and I'm talking about my motherboard or my CPU, I need to make sure that any of these, this is what we mean by specialist words, words that are related to specific sort of categories. A lot of my students who are footballers, if I'm asking them to write about a footballer, make sure they can spell their name right. You know, if they're talking about Pele, make sure they know P-E-L-E. If they're talking about Messi, M-E-S-S. So any words that are specific to certain contexts, so specialist words, anything that has ambitious or complex sounds or symbol relationships. That means anything that's got a silent letter in it. So that could be things like the word knife. If we're cutting something, the word knife has a silent K. If we're talking about more sort of specialised words, the common ones are government and environment, because most people, they have a silent letter in them. It's environment and government. Many people miss, and I will just make it large, they miss the N, because often when we say those words out loud, we don't pronounce it. Say environment, government. We don't pronounce that N, but it's there. So these are the kinds of words that it's saying, if you use them, spell them correctly. If you don't know how to spell the word and you're sitting in your exam, don't panic. You've got 2 choices. You can either go with your gut and try and spell. Let's say you want to write the word environment, but you're looking at it and you're thinking it looks wrong. Either go with your gut, be confident in yourself and write that word down. And if you're not sure, you can always come back to it and check it. You're allowed a pen and paper, so write it down a couple of different ways. See which one looks correct. Alternatively, find an easier way. Find an easier way of explaining it. If I can't spell the word environment, I might put it's bad for the community, or I could say, depending on the context of how I'm using the word environment, am I talking about the climate? Am I talking about my local area? There are lots of different words I could use instead. And if you're more confident doing it that way, there's nothing wrong with doing it at all. As long as the message that you are writing, that you are communicating, is clear, as long as your message comes across. So you can see for 3 marks, you are allowed to make a mistake as long as it doesn't affect the meaning. To get 2 marks, it says correct spelling of most basic words. There might be some errors in some ambitious words. And again, if you do make mistakes, they don't change the meaning. So you don't say, I went to see my doctor, and you spell S-E-A. I went to ocean my doctor. Doesn't make sense. So you are allowed to make spelling mistakes. Again, generally correct spelling, including maybe some specialist words, maybe some complex ones, but you are allowed to make errors. To score only 1 mark for spelling, you can have as many mistakes. It's not a case of if you have 3 mistakes, you get 3 marks. If you get 5 mistakes, you get, it's not like that. What they look is at generally, is it consistent? Are you spelling things well generally throughout the 2 pieces that you've written? It's one of the reasons why they give you a word count and ask you to write a minimum of 150 words at level 1 or 250 words at level 2. Because if you write less than that, it's very difficult for the exam board to be able to identify whether or not you've demonstrated these skills consistently. So for 1 mark, incorrect spelling affects the meaning. So you can spell the words wrong, or its readability. So it might make it difficult for the examiner to read and understand. We would still expect you to have some correct spelling of simple everyday words, including plurals. So when you're talking about more than one of something, but it says, but there may be frequent errors in more complex words. So if you do try to write more complex words and you make errors, then it would drop you down to 1 mark. So over the course of 1 writing exam, your spelling is worth 3 marks for 1 piece that you write and 3 marks for the other. So we've spent 40 minutes trying to go through different techniques, different things that you can do to get you from 1 or 2 marks into that 3, 4, 5, 6 marks sort of category. As I say, the best things I can ever recommend for spelling is making up your own mnemonic, trying to come up with your own way to remember how to spell something. I would show you one of my favourite examples, but I'm not sure I want to put it onto YouTube. However, I may do it afterwards because it's an example that, again, is silly. It works for me. And although I don't need to write that particular word down very often, it is awful to spell. But the technique that I have works for me a treat. So that's a couple of different techniques that we've got for helping to remember how to spell certain words. And as part of that, trying to remember the differences between how we spell words with different meanings. Now, if I just grab, I have one last little slide or 2 to share with you. This homophone's gone, bear with me. So some of you may have seen some of these slides in previous sessions, but it's just because it is such a good one. But it's worth bringing out for multiple sessions. So the key here was what I was saying about making things visual, making things silly, making them memorable. So you can see here, we've got the word bear, two different variations of it. They sound the same, bear and bear. The first one is the animal, B-E-A-R. The second one means to be empty, or if you're talking about a person being bare, then it means they are naked. So it means without anything. A cupboard can be bare, meaning there is nothing in it. So again, if you said you met a bear in the woods, it is very different to say that you were bare in the woods. One, in fact, both are, things that make it a bit funny. You've got to try to think about what can I do to help me remember these things? What works? What tickles my sort of sense of humour? What, as I say, it's slightly different for every different person. I like pictures. Here we go. I said that I always draw a picture when it comes to there, and there. If I'm talking about there, T-H-E-R-E. Now, I showed you, I do a physical motion over there. I'm talking about a place. Now, when I'm writing the word, if I need to remember it, I literally write them down in the same way as you can see on this slide. The first example, I put an arrow onto the R as a pointer, as something to remind me. That means there, a place, or it has the word here in it, which again is talking about a place. If we're talking about the word there, T-H-E-I-R, and talking about it belonging to somebody, I make the letter I into a stick person. Because you can't do that with either of the other spellings. And then I know I'm writing about a person. Something belongs to that person. So that's how that particular one works for me. And then there, okay, so it's pronounced slightly different, that one. But again, you can see, because we've got that apostrophe, it shows that there is a letter missing. And it should be the words they are. So whenever I see the word there, I pronounce it as the two separate words. And if it sounds right, I know it's been used correctly. Now, a couple of the other examples that we have on here are, so we've got been, and being, we're, were, and where, and where, and where. We've got lose and loose, advise and advice, and two, and two. Now, you can see on the slides of these examples, rather than talking you through each one, I've put just a word next to each one. And that, again, it acts as a prompt. It helps me to remember when I use each one of these. See things like advise and advice very often. Advice is something that you give. If somebody is asking you for guidance, you give them advice with a letter C, a soft C, so it makes a S sound. However, if you are then advising that person, it's something, one is something that you do, and one is the name of an abstract concept, and one is something that people ask for. So it's almost like throw and catch. You ask for advice, I give you you ask, I advise you, you ask for advice. There we go. It's the same as things like lose means I can't find something, but loose means not tight or baggy. Again, these are common mistakes. They are used on a very, very regular basis. In fact, I made a little list on here. So with my sports students, again, some of the ones that they mistake so often are things like physiology, psychology, and it's all about the fact that some of these letters are silent. Some of them don't follow English sort of rules of pronunciation. It's because they're not English words. And things like yours sincerely at the bottom of letters. A lot of people get that one wrong. I break it down into two words. and I literally write yours since rely, and then I know I've spelt it correctly. As for things like physiology and psychology, I see a lot of people spelling it either psychology or spycology, because these letters, like I say, they don't follow the normal rules. So that is the vast majority of what I wanted to sort of show you with regards to different techniques you can use for spelling and for homophones. I'm going to stop sharing this and just finish recording.